All right, let's talk about art and money. When you think about a painting selling for millions, what comes to mind, right? It's probably that classic scene, a packed auction house, the frantic bidding, and bam, the gavel comes down. We're all conditioned to think that's the moment value is decided. But here's the thing. What if that's all wrong? What if, in the world of high finance, that whole dramatic spectacle is just a small piece of a much, much bigger puzzle?
So this brings us to a really key question, and it's one that trips a lot of people up. Let's say you own a masterpiece, and you want to use it as collateral for a big loan. Do you have to have a public auction record for it? I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? It seems like a solid public number. But the real answer, well, it opens up the door to how this massive, multi-billion-dollar industry actually works behind the scenes.
And the answer, from pretty much every expert you could ask, is a flat, definitive no. It's just not true. The idea that you need an auction record is honestly one of the biggest myths in the art world. And look, this isn't just some hot take or an opinion. This is a fact. It's how the entire art finance industry functions, day in and day out.
And industry insiders, they don't mince words about this at all. There's this great quote from a detailed analysis that just says it straight. Thinking it's all about auctions is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the art finance industry operates. So, we're not just talking about a slightly different point of view here. We're talking about playing a completely different game with a totally different rulebook.
Okay, so let's actually peel back the curtain and look inside this industry. Because we're not talking about some tiny, niche corner of the financial world. This is a mature, incredibly sophisticated global market.
Get a load of this number. We're talking somewhere between $29 and $34 billion with a B. That was just the estimated size of the art-backed lending market in 2023. That's not pocket change, you know? This is a massive industry run by serious players who have this down to a science. They know exactly how to figure out what a piece of art is truly worth.
And who are these players exactly? Oh, just names you might have heard of. You've got the huge wealth management divisions of giants like Bank of America and BNY Mellon. And get this, even the auction houses themselves, like Christie's and Sotheby's, have their own separate financial services arms. These aren't side gigs for them. They have entire departments dedicated to just this.
And this whole thing isn't some kind of Wild West free-for-all. It's actually governed by a really strict professional framework called USPAP. Now, the definition of an appraisal in USPAP is super important. It says an appraisal is the act or process of developing an opinion of value. What's missing from that definition? Yep, any mention of an auction. It's about forming a professional opinion, not just reporting a single public sale.
Okay, so if it's not the crack of the gavel that decides the value, then what is? How do these experts actually come up with a number that a bank is willing to lend millions against? This is where we get into the real craft of appraisal.
It all boils down to one core concept: fair market value. And the official definition, which actually comes from the IRS, is super telling. It's the price that a willing buyer and a willing seller would agree on, where neither one is forced to act and both know all the relevant facts. Notice what it doesn't say. It doesn't say that transaction has to happen in a crowded auction room. It's a much broader idea.
So where do appraisers find this fair market value? Well, they look at the whole picture. They look at gallery sales, which set the retail price for new work. They dig into private sales, which, by the way, is a massive multi-billion-dollar market all on its own. And yeah, they look at auctions too. But look at the role auctions play here. They're just one data point among many, not the be-all and end-all.
You can think of an appraiser's job as being more like a detective. They're gathering clues, they're analyzing data from galleries, looking at private sales records, they're assessing the artist's entire career and reputation, and they're finding similar works to compare it to. They're building a whole case file. And then, way down the list, as just one piece of the evidence, they consider the auction records.
Okay, that's the theory. But a real-world example just makes it crystal clear. And the collection of an artist named Mark Saltz, it is the perfect case study. It shows you just how massive the value can be, completely separate from the auction house. Okay, brace yourself for this, because this is the mind-blowing part. On the left, you see the artist's entire public auction history. The highest sale, a measly $210. Now look at the right. That's the documented gallery pricing for just 22 of his pieces. We're talking about a difference that is, well, it's not even in the same universe. It's a totally different reality of value.
So when you bring in those professional appraisal standards we've been talking about, what's the grand total for the entire collection? A staggering $4.7 million. And that number is rock solid. It's defensible, it's bankable, and it's fully recognized by the financial industry, all with basically zero meaningful auction history. Incredible, right?
So, you gotta be asking, where does a number like $4.7 million even come from? It's not pulled out of thin air. It's built on a foundation of hard, verifiable facts. We're talking about representation by a major New York City gallery. We're talking about his work being held in museums like the Brooklyn Museum, prestigious grants from the NEA, a 45-year teaching career at a world-class school like Parsons. This stuff, this is the bedrock of real value. This is what appraisers and lenders actually care about.
All right, so we've busted the myth. The auction isn't king. So what? What does this actually mean in the real world? What are the financial consequences of being able to unlock an artwork's true, non-auction value? Well, what it means is access to some very serious cash. Based on that $4.7 million valuation, the Saltz collection could be used to secure a loan for millions. Even on a conservative loan, you're looking at over $2.3 million. That is the real, tangible power of a proper valuation that sees the whole picture, not just the auction.
And why are lenders totally cool with this? Because they have built a fortress of risk management around it. They're smart. They only lend a fraction of the appraised value, usually 40 to 70%. They require annual reappraisals to make sure the value is still current. And of course, the art itself has to be professionally stored and insured. The whole process is incredibly secure.
You know, this whole sophisticated model of valuation is actually what's making the future of art finance possible. All the cool, groundbreaking stuff you hear about, like tokenizing art, fractional ownership, even DeFi lending for art, it all hinges on one critical thing: having a reliable, trustworthy way to determine value that isn't chained to the auction schedule.
So at the end of the day, that public auction, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. It's the loudest and most visible part of the art market for sure, but it's often not the most important. And that kind of leaves you with a much bigger, more provocative question, doesn't it? If so much of an artwork's real value can be hidden in plain sight like this, what other assets are out there that we are systematically getting wrong just because we're not looking in the right places?